Okay, so welcome back to my channel. I am Jason, and this is from Sin's Perspective Reviews. I came across a new show, an interesting show, Black Narcissus. I'm aware that there was a film in the 1940s, which I have not seen. So, of course, you know, if you've seen the movie and you want to make comparisons to the movie and the TV show to see what, you know, what they changed as far as the storyline and such, please do so in the comments section. But I came across the show. I watched the first episode, and initially I was like, okay, this is moving kind of slow. But of course, as the episode progressed, it got a lot more interesting. So if you are interested in hearing what I have to say for Black Narcissus Season 1, Episode 1, stay tuned. Okay, so the show opens in Mapu, I hope I'm saying that right, Mapu, Himalayas, 1914. So there's this party, this gathering going on at Mapu Palace. It's a lot going on. You have some festivities going on, and then you hear a baby screaming, and it's like, okay, so they're continuing this party over this child screaming, but I guess such is the times. And so a woman walks into a room to comfort the child, and there was already a woman there. And it seems like as soon as the woman's back was turned, the woman basically went out through the patio door. And so now the woman is going after her. And I think forgive me if I mispronounce some of these names. The woman that ran out, her name was Srimati. I think that's what it is, Srimati. And so the woman is calling after her, and she runs to the roof. And unfortunately, she jumps off. So it's like, okay, what exactly is going on here? Is there something else at work? Is it like a postpartum kind of situation? And of course, you know, we continue to watch to see what's going to happen next. So 20 years later, we're looking at Darjeeling, British India, 1934, and the convent of St. Faith. The general is donating the palace. It's been empty for a while, and the general wants to donate the palace because he wants basically someone to do something with it. And so Sister Claudia is meeting with Reverend Sister Superior Dorothea, and Dorothea is telling her that, you know, the general, I guess they had something scheduled for that spring, but the general didn't want to wait that long. He wanted them to move forward with their plans sooner. And Sister Claudia wanted to be the person to head the mission. And Dorothea wasn't really, initially wasn't on board with that because she felt like Sister Claudia wasn't particularly ready, but she, you know, relented and decided that she would move forward and allow her to head the mission. So she now has to. They now have to decide who's going to go with her to help her out. And so there was Sister Bryony, who I'm not sure what. I think that she does some. She maybe have some medical background, and she does some other things. Sister Philippa, who does a lot of the gardening. She does, you know, the laundry, that kind of stuff. Sister Blanche is great with children, and the whole plan of them taking over, him donating Mapu Palace is for them to create a school for the children in the town. And Ruth, who she's good with lace and languages. And so they thought that, okay, they would be a good selection to go with her to, I guess, at the very least, get things started. Now, what was funny is that when Reverend Mother Dorothea was sitting with Claudia and was talking to her about about them going early, Claudia was basically like, you know, I can do a great job. I know I can make this a success. I. And Reverend Mother Dorothea made a point to say, you know, she pointed out the fact that she said, you know, I so many times. And so, and then eventually Sister Claudia said, we can, you know, make this a success. And so the reason I bring that up is that when Reverend Mother Dorothea suggested Ruth, Sister Claudia wasn't on board with that, because her thing was, I think that she wants to be important too much. And what was funny is that Sister Dorothea said, well, you two should have a lot in common, because she could see, you know, the kind of the arrogance and the pride in Sister Claudia. But again, she is going on faith and, you know, hoping that, you know, they will be able to be successful. And so Sister Claudia, she's talking with the father now, Father Robert, and he's blessed, you know, giving his blessing. And I guess he was supposed to go with him, but his health at this point isn't where it needs to be. And so they're hoping that at some point in the future, once he's, you know, better, he'll join them. But he did say that there was the brothers of St. Peter, you know, they spent some time there the year before, but they had failed to, I guess, do anything with the place, make it into a school. They were successful, and said, well, maybe you know, will be successful where they failed. And as they set off, I think Reverend Mother Dorothea turned to Father Robert and asked, well, what was the reason why the brothers of St. Peter failed? And he's like, well, you know, at this point, it's, you know, it's up in the air. Like, nobody really knows what happened. So, you know, they set off on their journey, and I mean, they're going over highways, byways, over hill and dale to get to this place. You know, they're able to ride on back of horses to a certain point, and then I think the majority of their trip they spent walking, going into the Himalayan mountains to get to this place. And so as they reached the top, they saw a man, Sonny Asi. I'm probably saying that wrong. He's a holy man, and he was sitting there Indian style, meditating, praying. I'm not exactly sure what he was doing, but they were kind of taken aback, because of course I'm not sure they've ever seen that before. And so as soon as they turned the corner, they saw Mapu Palace. And, you know, at this point, it's almost dark. And the only thing they have with them, I guess the other people that were with them carrying, you know, the other goods had to take another route, because they, you know, had to go up into the mountain. So they did a lot of walking. So the only thing they had with them once they reached the top was their sleeping mats. And so, of course, they go into the palace. And, of course, the atmosphere is, you know, kind of creepy. It's kind of dark, but I think, you know, it wasn't as far as the cleanliness wasn't as bad as they thought it was going to be. And that's when they were introduced to Unga. She's actually the caretaker, and surprisingly, 20 years earlier, she was actually Sri Mata's nurse. So she was the woman that came in to comfort the baby when Sri Mata basically committed suicide. And so she's still there, making sure the place, you know, dealing with the upkeep of the place. And so, you know, they find where they're going to sleep for that night, and they, you know, set up camp. And off the back, Sister Ruth was having issues. You know, she couldn't sleep. She started talking to Sister Claudia, and Claudia basically said that, you know, now is not the time. You know, basically just, you know, put your mind at ease. You know, basically everything is going to be fine. And, you know, she just wanted her to rest, and she wanted to rest, and, you know, that was pretty much it. But you can kind of see that from the start, Sister Ruth was having some adjustment issues. So the next morning, Sister Claudia wakes up, and Mr. Dean is there. And Mr. Dean is the general's agent. And so her and Sister Blanche go out to greet him. And they talk for a while. And eventually Unga invites them in for breakfast. So they sit down to have breakfast. And he started talking about Unga. And he was like, have you told them about your travels around Europe? And she was like, well, they ain't interested in hearing about me or my story. And he tells them that she was Sri Mata's nurse, and she traveled with the family. And if you find out that Sri Mata, this is obviously the woman that committed suicide, is actually the general's sister. And he was saying, you know what the locals call this place, and he said the House of Women. So I think, well, Sister Claudia seems to be the more worldly of the group, and maybe Sister Philippa, Sister Ruth didn't actually get it at first. And she said, well, that's confusing because the brotherhoods, the Brotherhood of St. Peter, it would have been an all boys school. So why would this be considered the House of Women? And then, Mr. Dean goes into, oh, well, the general's father had built the palace, and it was basically a place for him to go and engage in debaucherous behaviors, basically. And, Sister Claudia stood up and said, well, from this moment on, it's going to be known as the Convent of Saint Faith. And so, as they were wrapping up, she followed him outside, and he asked her to make a list of the, like the repairs and things that they need. And she was like, well, there's no reason, there's no need for you to worry about that. I already spoke with the general, and the general's clerk is going to take care of the things that we need. And he was like, what's his name? Ima. He basically said that the person was basically useless, and the only reason that he got, got the job was through a relative or some such. And she said, well, he also promised us, someone named Joseph Anthony. And, they talked for a little bit, and, she basically told him that she's aware that he has some, other, profession. He does something else, and that he should, he could go ahead and focus on that. And then she walked away. He told her, like, pride is a sin. And, from my understanding, one of the deadly ones. And then he said, you know what, the monks who were here before lasted 5 months. So he said, I'll give you until, the next reign or something to that effect. And so, of course, she walked away. And so now they're inside, cleaning. And Sister Claudia, she's writing to Mother Superior Dorothea to give them an update on, what's going on, the progress. And so you have, and then while they're doing the voiceover with her, writing, basically telling the Mother Superior what's going on. So while this is going on, you see Bryony, she brings out this mirror that's covered. And you saw Unga, she saw the mirror, and obviously it looked familiar to her. And, Philippa, she's weeding. She's trying to get the ground ready for them to plant their garden. Ruth and Blanche are inside. They're doing the dusting and the cleaning and all of that from on the inside. And you have Claudia. She's trying to fix the plumbing. They need a working toilet. And she's trying to work on that with very little. She's not being successful in getting that done. So while they were, clear during the course of their cleaning, Sister Ruth comes across a dead cat, and she screams. Of course, Sister Philippa, and I think it was Sister Bryony, ran up to see, to make sure she was okay. And, they got the cat, and, Sister Philippa said she would bury the cat. So later on that day, you saw Sister Bryony and Sister Claudia talking, and she was, basically saying that, Sister Ruth is having a difficult time adjusting, and, that she made mention of, I guess a couple of them complained about stomach problems, and, she can't figure out what the stomach, what's going on with that, but, she's still working to come up with some remedies. Sister Ruth has been complaining about headaches, and so Brian has been making her this powder. It works, but it only works for a short amount of time, and it's a lot of adjusting. It's a lot of adjusting. So I can't remember if it was Bryony or if it was Sister Bryony or Sister Ruth. They're now in, I guess, what would be the classroom, and you can kind of see, like, throughout, some of these scenes, you can kind of see flashes of the past. And there's still some of the artwork that was on the walls at the time, scantily clad women and such. And so, every so often, a gust of wind will come through, the windows, would clatter and blow open. And eventually, she heard the door open. And so she goes in to see, who could be back there. And that's when you see this little boy. And so she took the little boy to Sister Claudia and was like, I found, this person, found this child roaming around. And he introduced himself as Joseph Anthony. So I guess when the general said Joseph Anthony, she was expecting an adult male who was going to actually be able to do some work around the place. But that's what they got. And so they asked like why he was there, and he told them that he was there to prepare for the general's visit. And they said, oh, they were surprised. They were taken aback, like, oh, the general's coming to visit. And they said, well, when? Well, right now. So they had very little time to actually get some things in order. So the general arrives. They go out to greet him, and of course, Mr. Dean is with him. And they head inside. So before Sister Claudia and the general make it inside, I think it was Brian that asked Unga, like, who is the young man with him? Is that his son? And she was like, oh, Dilipa is actually his nephew. He is Srimati's son. So this was the baby that she went into the room to comfort, who's now a grown man. And so they make it into the room, and she, explains to him that this is going to be the classroom. And he talked about how he was disappointed that the Brotherhood of St. Peter, they didn't, stay long. And I guess his vision of doing something with the place didn't come to fruition. And he thought, I figured, like, why not? Why not let you women try? But it was, the way he said it was so kind of demeaning. Like, the men couldn't do it. So, I mean, yeah, if the men couldn't do it, then, let me go ahead and give these women's a try. It was offensive. Okay. But, and he talked about how he never liked that place and how there was always some strange goings on there. And of course, that's where his sister committed suicide. And, he basically said that the house has never been a good place. And Sister Claudia said that, they want to keep the integrity of the place, and, they're just going to do what, as much adjustments as they need. And he was like, I don't really care what you do with it. I want it to be different. He want them to bring a different energy to the place. And he don't care if they, what kind of alterations or renovations they have to do. He just feels like he wants it to be different. He wants there to be a different feel to the place. And so, after the visit, he's leaving, and she asked him if he can send workmen to help them out. And he said, oh, well, to do that, where that's concerned, you'd have to talk to Mr. Dean. And so she ends up having to deal with him anyway. Like, she was kind of being a word that begins with a B and ends with an H. But we're not going to say, Sister Claudia. But in the end, she ends up having to deal with him anyway. And so, as the men were leaving, you can kind of, there's a flash of a memory that Sister Claudia was having where she had her hair down, she had this long hair, and she's going horseback riding, and like, you can tell that she's, kind of thinking about the life she had before she, took her vows. So, the next day, one of the guys that were coming in, they had a letter for Sister Claudia, and it was from the general's clerk, the person who was supposed to help them with whatever it is that they need. And she went in to take it to Sister Claudia, and basically the letter is saying, she wasn't happy, it wasn't good news. And so she went out, and as her and Sister Ruth were walking outside, Sister Ruth was, trying to tell her about the, the idea she had for the classroom and, the whole thing. And Sister Claudia was like, that all sounds great, but we could talk about this at a different time. And she kind of cut her off, and she went to talk to Sister Philippa, who was still outside, getting the garden ready. And she was telling her that the clerk, basically, who is supposed to be there to help them, I guess he's, been sick for a while and is not able to do what it is that they need them to do. And when she was looking over the hill, and she could see this little house or shack, I know a house further down. And they did pass this place, but at the time they didn't know who lived there. And it's actually Mr. Dean's house. And we know that because eventually Sister Claudia ends up writing a letter, and she had Anthony, Joseph Anthony delivered the letter to him, basically saying they need his assistance. So sometimes it's hard to tell the time frame, if this is the same day, the next morning. I don't know. Sister Claudia was standing at the window, and you can see she was another memory of her. She's like completely naked, sitting in front of this lake, like she had gone swimming, and she's clearly not by herself, even though you can't see, the person that she's looking back at. Because even when she was horseback riding, it was like she was looking back at someone. Sister Ruth comes in and says that the children are here and Mr. Dean are with them. And of course they're like, okay, we're nowhere near ready, and but the general wanted them to get started with the school. So now they're all outside. Sister Blanche is ecstatic because she loves children and she loves working with children. Sister Ruth, not so much. And of course, he was also there because she sent the letter saying that they needed help. So she was thankful that, he came. And so now you have the kids are in the classroom and they're kind of milling about. You can see Sister Blanche kind of trying to get everything organized. You see Sister Ruth standing over there. She's kind of like, okay, I do not want to deal with these little people. Sister Claudia goes over and tells her, she asked her to go, request, told, how you want to say it, to go over and help Sister Blanche. And so, of course, Joseph Anthony is, able to communicate with them, with the kids. So he's able to basically relay whatever the messages is that they need him. So they needed them to sit down. And so, of course, Joseph went and helped them, get the kids together and get them seated and situated so they're now able to learn. So while this is going on, Sister Claudia and Mr. Dean, they're in the bathroom and he's working on the plumbing. And he, fortunately, was able to get the toilet working. And so, as they were talking, he told her that the general was actually, I guess, paying the kids or paying the parent to go to school. And she was basically like, well, I don't like the idea of children being paid to come to school. After he finished that, he told her that, tomorrow there'll be another guy there to work on the paint, to paint the roof and, things of that nature. And while that was going on, she had another memory of her running through these fields. It was like these, I don't know if it was daisies. I don't know what kind of flower that was, but she's clearly remembering, going back to a time when she was, I guess, young and carefree. There was an awkward moment where they were kind of face to face and she really didn't know what to say. And all he was trying to do was get his jacket. She was kind of blocking his jacket. And they talked for a little bit and he left. And so Sister Claudia pins another update to Reverend Mother to let them know what's going on. So Philippa, she's now has help to get the garden together. Bryony is there, she's still organizing, making sure everything is okay. They're making sure that they have access to all the rooms, and they realize that the key to what was Srimati's room is missing. So they have no idea what happened to that key. And Sister Claudia starts asking him about the holy man and how, is there any way, can he move, or can they do something, to kind of get him to be somewhere else? And he basically said that no, you can't. So while this was going on, Ruth and Blanche walked in with this little boy who he has this rash on his face, and Blanche, of course, is like, well, we should probably figure out what, try to treat him. And Ruth was like, no, he needs to go. For all we know, he got the corona, or, she didn't say corona, but obviously she didn't. But he has, something, and we don't want to catch it, and we want him to go. But you can see Ruth don't like kids anyway, so any reason to get them out of there, she's on board with. And so they started going back and forth. And Sister Claudia got kind of upset. She was like, that is not a way to behave, because they started kind of snipping at each other. And then, Ruth, her impatience and, you know, her bluntness was inappropriate. And so eventually Mr. Dean steps in and he looks at the boy and he basically I'm not going to say he sided with Ruth, but what he did tell them was that it's best for them not to get involved, because if even you could have the best of intentions, but if something goes wrong, if you give him something that makes it worse, or makes, you know, God forbid something, he dies, there's going to be hell to pay from the people in the village, even though you could have the best of intentions. So he's basically telling them, don't get involved. So it wasn't so much that he was siding with Ruth. It was more so just the climate. He's basically telling them not to get involved. But of course, Ruth took it as him. You can kind of tell that she took it as him siding with her, because she had this little smirk on her face. Like she really wanted to say, nan. Told ya we should have just let him go. And so eventually, Mr. Dean said that he would take the little boy back to his mother, so they wouldn't have to worry about that. And so later, I'm assuming it's that night, they're they're doing laundry and they're talking, and a gust of wind comes in and eventually it blows the cover off the mirror. So when Inga saw the mirror outside, she took it back in and hung it back on the wall. And so Sister Philippa and Sister Bryony and Sister Ruth are looking in the mirror. And Sister Bryony and Sister Philippa were amazed at what they saw, because they were saying that how they hadn't seen their reflection since, I guess, shortly before they took their vows. And, you know, they're not young women, so it's been many, many years since they've seen themselves. And so they were, for a minute, kind of taken aback. And you saw Anga saying that, you know, Srimati would look in that mirror. It was like, I don't know what she was looking for, but she would just stare at herself for hours and hours. So while Sister Philippa and Sister Bryony went back to doing what they were doing, you can kind of see Sister Ruth, she was still standing there. And when it went, you know, you saw the mirror, you kind of see Srimati's reflection in the mirror. So Sister Ruth was seeing something. And so eventually Sister Philippa went over and she covered the mirror, again. So it's like, oh, dang, what's that amount? So, Sister Claudia, she's in her office and the wind blows the windows open. And she walks over and she's looking out the window, and Mr. Dean arrives. And he brought Kanchi with him. And he basically felt that she would be better off there. He made it a point to say that her mother had passed and it's best that she stay out of her father's way. And he thought it would be better for her to be there getting education than hanging around his place. I guess we don't know the nature of the relationship. But it seems like he seemed like a good guy at this point. And he just thought that it would just be better and safer for her to be there. And so Sister Claudia rung the bell, and Sister Bryony walks in with coffee, and then she started talking about the holy man and how people were talking about how they're going to wait for him after he dies. They're going to burn him, and something that was kind of shocking. And Mr. Dean said something, but it was said to kind of get Bryony's goat, and they basically laughed. And, you know, they talked for a bit after, you know, Bryony left. Sister Claudia and Mr. Dean talked a little bit. And she was like, you really don't believe in what we're trying to do here either. He was like, you know, I believe that you believe in what you're trying to do. And she was like, well, what would you teach them if you were in our position, what would you teach them? He was basically like, I would teach them to expect nothing, because that's exactly what you're going to get. It was kind of, okay, that's kind of depressing. But I think his whole stance was his view of the world, as far as to him, he's more realistic. Like, he just doesn't, he doesn't believe in all of that, the spiritual, you know, that kind of thing. He believed in what's in front of him, what he can see and what he can touch. And I mean, that was basically the gist of their conversation, and he said his goodbyes. Later that night, Sister Claudia, she was having a dream, and she was walking through, the halls of the convent, walks into this room. There's these drapes. Every so often, when they have these echoes of the past, you see these fabrics, these gorgeous fabrics, and the wind is blowing, and then walking through the fabrics, and then you see this man who's there that she clearly knows, and he's holding up a mirror, and she can see her reflection. Obviously, she's in her habit and everything, but in the reflection, she looked like her old self with the long hair and the whole thing. And next you know, she ends up kissing this man. She's startled by Sister Ruth, who was she's having issues sleeping. And so she walked Sister Ruth back to her room, and, basically you told her again, you should put your mind at ease, that, you're okay. And Sister Ruth is like, there's something wrong with this house. Like, I don't think that we should be here. And Sister Clara don't want to hear that. She basically like, it's just the wind, and, it's just your mind playing tricks on you, and just try to get some rest. And so the next morning, the class is going on, and you got Sister Blanche, she's over there with the kids. And because Sister Ruth is good at lace work, she's working with Kanchi, and it was another woman who was there. And, so you have that conversation going on. You have Sister Blanche, working with the kids. You have Mr. Dean. He's, there's hammering and banging. He's doing some repairs. And you can see that Ruth is clearly agitated. And all of the noise, and you kind of see, like, it seemed like everything was more intense. Like, she was having these auditory, and I think some visual kind of issues. Like, there were some flashbacks of the past, and then, it was a lot going on. And she kind of just, Snap told them they need to stop talking and do more work. And so, she sat down with them to work with them. And then eventually it got to her, and she basically told them to shut up and, to stop talking. And she picked up this umbrella like she was about to start swinging that thing and clear the room, right? So, of course, everybody is now sitting there staring at her like, what in the world? As even Mr. Dean stopped to look at her like, okay, huh. So she left the room, and he went back to work, and they continued on doing what they were going to do. Sister Blanche, it seemed like she got up to go after her, but we, don't really know where Sister Blanche went. So later that day, Sister Clara walks into the classroom, and she goes in to talk to, I guess Sister Ruth was doing, she was clean. I don't know if she was kind of straightening up or something. And Sister Clara walked in to talk to her, and asked her how her headache was going. And she said, I always feel a lot better after the sun goes down. And she started complimenting her on the dolls that she made, and, how beautiful they were, and how beautiful her lace work is. And Sister Claudia was like, I'm glad that you said that, because I think the other sisters are jealous of me. People are always jealous of me. And that kind of rubbed Sister Claudia the wrong way. But then the bell rung, and she said that it was compline time. I don't know if that's like contemplation, or just quiet time. I guess time for them to reflect, to pray, or, whatever the case may be. So you had Sister Claudia, Sister Bryony I don't know if she was knitting or stitching something, I don't know. Sister Ruth, and I think may have been Sister Blanche. I don't know if I saw Sister Philippa in there. And you can kind of see Sister Claudia as in deep in thought, and then she kind of glanced over at Sister Ruth. Like, you can see, it seemed like she was mulling over, like she knew she was about to, she had to make a difficult decision. And so, the next day, Sister Claudia met with Ruth, and she basically told her that basically she's going to switch her and Sister Blanche. So Sister Blanche is going to move to the lace work. So she's going to be working with Kanchi and the other woman as far as teaching them lace work. And Sister Ruth is going to work with the kids. And Sister Ruth was like, Sister Blanche is with the kids. I find them noisy, and basically I have no use for them. And of course, Sister Claudia is upset, and she basically tells her that it is our job to serve the Lord, and a lot of the times that requires that we do things that comes less easy to us. And then she said, well, that's easy for you to say. You're the youngest sister superior. And she said something else, and Sister Claudia basically told her to stop talking. Or she basically, I think she said her name Sister Ruth, but she said it in an aggressive way, and she said it in a way that Sister Ruth knew that she meant, okay, you need to stop talking. Around this time, Mr. Dean walks in, and she told Sister Ruth that they'll continue that conversation after chapel. And Sister Ruth apologized, and she walked out. And as she was walking, she kind of stormed out of the building. And for some reason, there was this bowl of milk in front of the door. She ends up stepping in the bowl of milk. And Anga said that the milk was for Srimati. And Sister Ruth was like, well, I would advise you not to do that anymore. Otherwise, you have to deal with Sister Bryony about wasting milk. And so back in Claudia's office, Mr. Dean is there. He's there because he's, I guess done this. I don't want to say this draft of what the palace could look like, what the convent can look like. And she was saying it looked more like a temple than church. And their instructions come from the order at Canstead, and I guess they have their own way of how they want these, places, their religious houses to look. And he basically said, okay, so he sat down and lit a cigarette, and he started asking her about Kanchi and how she was adjusting, and the way the conversation was going, she felt that he was being overly familiar, but I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that she was frustrated at Sister Ruth. And they talked a little bit, and she basically told him that she didn't want him talking to him in a way that was overly familiar. And he basically told her that, I don't want you talking to me like this. I'm not one of your acolytes, and I would advise you not to speak to me like that again, especially if you want another stitch of work done around here. And so, around this time, Sister Ruth, she made her way back to, I guess the hall. I don't know. I guess it would be the hall where they did the laundry, where the mirror was. And, of course, the cover's off the mirror again. She's now looking in the mirror. She looks away. Of course, she looks back at the mirror, and she sees Srimati's reflection. So while Mr. Dean and Sister Claudia are kind of going back and forth, they hear a scream. They run out to the garden. This man is injured somehow. Really bad. There's blood everywhere. And Sister Claudia is trying to stop the bleeding. She's trying to tell them to put a compress on to try to stop the bleeding. She's telling Sister Bryony to go get a needle. Mr. Dean is telling her not to get involved, that she shouldn't do anything. Around this time, Sister Ruth comes out, and she clearly looked like she's seen a ghost. She goes over to Sister Claudia. Of course, Sister Claudia, she's, trying to deal with this man that's bleeding. Sister Ruth is pulling on her, telling her she needs to talk to her, and how she just saw Srimati. Mr. Dean is telling her she's telling her that she needs to stay out of it. And she's basically told him that she don't need any help from him. And so he kind of looked at her, and then Sister Ruth is still pulling on her, trying to tell her and how this place is haunted, how she saw Srimati, and she basically, in the end, Sister Claudia ends up slapping Sister Ruth. Of course, her hand is covered in blood, so when she slapped her, the blood is now on the side of Sister Ruth's face. Everything stopped in its tracks, because they're like, okay. I think she realized she had gone too far. And the next thing you know, this bright light shines on Sister Ruth's face. And then you see Anga, and she says, okay, so basically it's starting all over again. And that's how this episode ends. So, like I said, it did start off slow, but it did pick up, after they got to Mapu Palace. So, I'm going to end this here, and I will talk to you guys later.